Jake Wilson thought being laid off from his IT job was the end of the line, until a suspicious email, a deleted server room, and a buried financial trail revealed he wasn't redundant. He was a threat. In a world where silence is survival, Jake chooses to fight back, risking everything to expose a billion-dollar corporate fraud that was never meant to see the light of day. Jake Wilson stared at the company-wide email blinking on his monitor. Organizational restructuring and strategic. Downsizing? His pulse quickened. He'd seen those euphemisms before. After 17 years of loyal service in the IT department at Stratus Core Solutions, it wasn't a stretch to assume trouble was brewing. At 52, Jake was no stranger to corporate shifts. He'd survived 3 department heads, 2 mergers, and a brief brush with bankruptcy during the 2008 crisis. But this felt different, cold, clinical. No hallway murmurs, no departmental chatter. Just silence and a forced Zoom meeting invite for 2 p.m. labeled HR Transition Briefing. By 2:05, the screen lit up with the tight smiles of Karen from HR and Damien Patel, the newly appointed CTO, who looked barely 30. "Jake," Karen said with the cheery emptiness of someone reciting a script, "thank you for joining. I'll get right to it. Your position has been made redundant as part of the global restructuring initiative." Jake blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. "Redundant? My position? I manage the core server architecture and cybersecurity protocols. We're migrating those services to a third-party cloud provider," Damien interjected. "More scalable, cost-effective. Nothing personal. Nothing personal." The words landed like gravel in his stomach. "You'll receive a severance package," Karen added quickly. 2 months' pay, continuation of healthcare benefits for 90 days, and career transition services. Jake leaned back, stunned. "How long has this been in the works?" "A few months," Damien said. "It was confidential due to legal and contractual reviews. A few months. They'd known. While he worked late, patched vulnerabilities, and trained younger hires who now remained employed." The call ended. Jake sat still, eyes scanning the room he had turned into a second home, personalized mug, whiteboard diagrams, and the old server schematics pinned behind his monitor like war medals. Gone, just like that. But as the fog of shock began to clear, something else stirred in him: curiosity. Jake wasn't just an IT guy, he was meticulous, obsessive even. And something about the abruptness of the migration and the secrecy around it didn't add up. Stratus Core's server transition was still in Phase 1, and he hadn't been consulted on any data transfer protocols, something that would have been mandatory given his seniority and access. That night, he accessed the company VPN one last time, technically still active for 48 hours as part of the transition grace period. He dove into the system logs, starting with the back-end server event trails. At 1:27 a.m., he found the first breadcrumb, a back-end data tunnel, encrypted, unauthorized, running since last month. The encryption mask was sophisticated, but Jake recognized the pattern. It was one he had created years ago for secure internal testing. Someone had copied his old firewall bypass tool, modified it, and deployed it to siphon data without triggering alerts. He followed the trail. The IPs traced back to a private offshore server. But what chilled him was the type of data being extracted: internal audits, investor summaries, whistleblower reports. Not engineering files, not customer data, legal documents, financial disclosures. Jake sat back in his chair, breathing shallowly. This wasn't just a cost-cutting cloud migration. Someone was covering their tracks, and they'd made sure the one man who might notice him was the first out the door. By morning, he had printed what he could without raising alarm: partial logs, packet trails, metadata, timestamps. Enough to build a case, but not enough to go public. Yet, Before leaving for the office one last time, Jake told his wife, Sarah, only this. "There's more to my layoff than they're telling. I need to dig carefully." She looked at him, concerned and knitting her brow. "Promise me you won't do anything reckless." He kissed her forehead. "I won't, but I can't just walk away." Back at Stratus Core, he cleared out his desk with polite nods and half-hearted farewells. But his eyes scanned every face. Who else knew? Who was complicit? And, more importantly, who was next? Jake Wilson spent the next 3 days living a double life. By day, he was the recently laid-off employee graciously accepting condolences from co-workers via LinkedIn. By night, he was a forensic investigator in his cold case, poring through archived server snapshots, encrypted logs and backdoor exploits, tools he once built to test the system's strength, now used to probe its weakness. The deeper he dug, the darker it got. A shell company, Nexora Consulting, had been paid over $8 million in the last 9 months. It was listed in the vendor ledger as Infrastructure Optimization Partner, but Jake couldn't find a single approved contract, project plan, or due diligence file. And the data tunnel? It connected directly to a Nexora-owned IP, he felt sick. Even more damning, Nexora's registration listed a name he hadn't seen in years. Miles Bennett, former CFO of Stratus Core, forced to resign 5 years ago amid an internal scandal that conveniently never went public. Jake remembered the whispers: misappropriated funds, insider trading, a near whistleblower incident. It had all been buried. Now Miles was back, quietly laundering data and money through a ghost vendor, and someone high up was helping him. Jake compiled everything, PDFs, screenshots, IP traces, into an encrypted drive labeled Redundancy Reversed. He needed someone with power, someone clean, to take it further. He thought of Sophia Tran, a former legal compliance officer who'd left Stratus Core under murky circumstances. They'd worked together briefly during a server lockdown incident. She had integrity and no love for corporate cover-ups. Jake found her on Twitter, of all places, posting about corporate ethics and SEC loopholes. He messaged her privately. "It's Jake Wilson. Stratus Core let me go. I found something you need to see. It involves Miles. Urgent." Her reply came 2 hours later. "Meet me in person. No phones. Tomorrow. 11:30 a.m. Elmwood Cafe." Jake arrived early, his eyes scanning every parked car, every pedestrian. He clutched his briefcase tightly. Paranoia had begun to settle in, especially after he noticed a black SUV parked down the street, the same make and color that had been idling outside his neighborhood yesterday. Sophia arrived 5 minutes late, wearing sunglasses and a hoodie. She looked different, older, edgier, but focused. "You weren't kidding," she said, after flipping through the folder Jake handed her. "This is federal fraud territory." "I think they fired me because I got too close," Jake said. "They knew I'd find the tunnel eventually." Sophia nodded slowly. "They're scrubbing the company clean, getting rid of records, employees, people who know too much." Jake's voice dropped. "You too," she smiled grimly. "I left before they could. But not before I made copies of everything I filed internally. They ignored every red flag I raised about Nexora." Jake leaned in. "I want this exposed, but I can't do it alone." Sophia tapped her fingers against the ceramic mug. "I know someone at the SEC. Quiet, honest. He'll want this." But before they could speak further, Sophia's phone buzzed. One glance and her face went pale. "What is it?" Jake asked. She turned the screen toward him. "Stratus Core office fire. Server room destroyed in suspected electrical malfunction." Jake's blood ran cold. He knew the server room like the back of his hand. There were no loose wires, no surge at risk. It wasn't an accident. They were erasing the evidence. Do you still have remote access? She asked quickly. Jake shook his head. They pulled all credentials, but I backed up metadata logs stored off-grid. Good, she said. We go public now. Later that night, Jake returned home to find his mailbox tampered with and an unmarked envelope shoved inside. No return address, no stamp, just one word typed on a plain sheet of paper. Stop. He turned it over. The backside held a blurred photo, him and Sophia at the cafe that morning. His hands trembled. They were being watched. Jake Wilson didn't sleep that night. The photo, the message, the server fire. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was a threat, real and close. Someone was watching, and they wanted him to disappear quietly. But Jake wasn't wired for fear. Not anymore. By morning, he'd made 2 decisions. He would not back down. If anything happened to him or Sophia, the truth would still come out. He encrypted the entire evidence folder, embedded it in an innocuous video file labeled Family BBQ 2023 and uploaded it to 4 cloud drives using anonymous burner accounts. Then he wrote a timed message. If I don't log in within 72 hours, send this to every media outlet on the list. The list included Wired, Reuters, a trusted cybersecurity blog, and a few independent investigative journalists that Sophia had suggested. He sent her a copy with one sentence. We go together or we burn the place down, Sophia called within minutes. You want to do this? Jake didn't hesitate. We've got the bullets. Time to pull the trigger. They arranged a quiet meeting with Sophia's contact, Agent Henry Mora, a senior investigator at the SEC. Middle-aged, skeptical, and blunt, Mora had a reputation for being hard to impress. They met in a downtown hotel lobby under the pretense of attending a financial tech seminar. Jake handed over the encrypted USB. This better not be another disgruntled employee's sob story, Mora said flatly. Check the metadata on the financial transfers, Jake replied. Cross-reference them with Miles Bennett's offshore interests. The shell companies, the real-time data siphon to Nexora, Mora raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Sophia added, You'll also find buried internal reports from me, compliance violations ignored by Stratus Corps' board. Mora pocketed the drive. If this checks out, it's not just fraud. It's national-level cybercrime. Jake leaned in. They've already started covering their tracks. They burned the server room yesterday. Mora didn't flinch. Then let's move faster than they do. The dominoes began to fall within 48 hours. Mora's preliminary review validated the financial anomalies. The data dump Jake and Sophia provided was airtight. Timestamps, IP chains, falsified invoices, and hidden server relays. A sealed subpoena was issued. The FBI Cybercrime Division got looped in. Stratus Corps' HQ was raided just after dawn. News broke by noon. SEC launches full-scale investigation into tech giant Stratus Corps amid allegations of fraud, data theft. Miles Bennett's name hit the headlines again. This time, not buried in rumor, but front and center, along with 2 senior executives who were escorted out in handcuffs. Jake watched the news from his small kitchen, a coffee cup in hand, disbelief settling in like dust after a storm. It was over, but it had only just begun. Sophia called. We did it. Feels unreal, Jake said. They're calling you a whistleblower. You'll probably get subpoenaed and sued and praised. Jake chuckled softly. Sounds about right. There was a pause. I got a call from a data ethics non-profit, Sophia added. They want us to speak at their next conference about corporate cover-ups, digital footprints, resilience. Jake looked out the window at the street below. Once the black SUV was gone, he exhaled. Let's do it. Might as well use this mess for something good. 2 months later, Jake stood behind a podium in a packed conference hall, introduced as the man who helped expose one of the largest internal fraud networks in tech history. He told his story, not with bitterness, but with clarity, about redundancy, silence, surveillance, and the choice to resist. Afterward, a young woman approached him. "You said you used to feel invisible at your job. How did you push through?" Jake smiled. "I realized being invisible wasn't a curse, it was a cover. And sometimes the quiet ones are the ones who bring the whole system down." Strata's Core's stock plummeted. Class action lawsuits flooded in. Internal documents leaked to the press painted a picture of a company built on innovation but rotted by greed. Jake was offered settlements, speaking engagements, even book deals. But he returned to what he loved: cybersecurity, freelance investigations, mentoring younger IT professionals. Sophia launched a digital watchdog group focused on corporate accountability. As for the envelope with the word "Stop," Jake framed it, hung it on his office wall, a reminder that silence isn't safety, it's a choice, and he chose to speak.